they can utilize SMSF, how exactly does it work, why you got into this, and what your specialty is. More and more clients are wanting to use super as an investment vehicle. Why has it been so popular the last 5-6 years? What's changed in the market? If you could use 20, 30, 40% of that money in there to buy a property, by all means, give yourself the opportunity to retire early. So what's the one thing clients or members need to understand before opening a SMSF?
This becomes more an exercise of cost benefit analysis.
100% right team, right people, right branding behind you is what you need to get the right outcome. Vic, thank you for joining. So let's have a discussion about SMSF. A lot of my clients keep asking me how they can utilize SMSF and how exactly does it work. But firstly, tell us a bit about yourself, why you got into this, and what your specialty is.
Yeah, so Daniel, I've been doing this for almost last 15 years.
Yeah, nice.
And basically I work in the space of SMSF, which is self-managed super funds. I got into this mainly because when I had clients who I used to manage with regards to superannuation, their investments, I thought they needed a structure which could allow them to take benefit of, investing in a kind of a wrap and an investment product, which could offer them better retirement benefits. I started...
Can you just talk about that? Better retirement benefits. How would you, what does that mean for an everyday Australian to take advantage of?
Yeah, so essentially what happens is as you approach retirement, most of the money which goes into your super is tax-free. So essentially, if we make more contributions into our super, and let's say we currently pay 30 to 40% tax on our salaries, it makes a lot of sense to put more money into super, either through contributions or through salary sacrificing, and try to build up a bigger nest egg, because at the age of 60, you're going to get all that money back tax-free. So essentially, rather than spending money on things which are not tax deductible, if you have free cash, rather than spending it on discretionaries, it's better to put money into super and then build your position where you're up to $2 million you could have super tax-free, basically.
Me talking to my clients, I think more than ever the last 4 or 5 years, and you told me otherwise, more and more clients are wanting to use super as an investment vehicle. Why has it been so popular the last 5-6 years? What's changed in the market? Why is it education? What do you feel like it really is?
So I think one of the major drivers is the fact that when they have their money in superannuation funds, the so-called default normal funds, they don't have control on the investments.
Correct.
And markets have been very volatile. It's not that they've always lost money. They do make money as well, but it's very volatile. They have no control. Essentially, when they see their investments go up and down, they get anxious. So essentially, when you take control through a self-managed super fund, there is obviously the fact that you can control your investments. You can diversify them. And obviously, it doesn't mean you need to have just one class of assets. You could have various classes of assets and diversify and have more control.
I think that's key, Vic. Like you said, diversify your assets. Sometimes we just get focused on doing one thing only, and that's all it is. But even in life in general, you constantly have to be doing certain different avenues to kind of make ends meet or be successful in Australia these days. And I think you said it perfectly. Diversify your super. So if you have, say, 300-400k in your super, maybe look at putting some of that into a property. No, I'm not saying use all the money, because I know some clients have been saying, Daniel, I don't want to use all my retirement money. I want to keep some in there. And I agree in some cases. If you could use 20, 30, 40% of that money in there to buy a property, by all means, give yourself the opportunity to retire early. And a lot of clients are not thinking this way, but guess looking at social media and just Googling SMSF, there is so much misinformation out there. If I want to ask you the right question, what's the one most important thing of why people, other than retirement, need to set up their super? Or is it only for retirement? So what's the one thing clients or members need to understand before opening a SMSF?
So the main thing they need to consider obviously is the fact that there are costs involved. Essentially with costs, you have to outweigh, you've got to weigh the returns. So essentially it becomes more an exercise of cost benefit analysis. So if you're going to have a balance of say 200,000 or 250 in your super, you've got to wonder as to, you really want to pay your super fund 1.5% to 2% every year as expenses. All super funds charge money, management expense costs and stuff. So once you have around $250,000, you have to have super. It's not that it's a choice. Everybody who works has to have a super balance, even under law, or the employer keeps contributing the money. So once you have over $250,000 in a super, you could probably look at strategies where the benefits can outweigh the cost. That's where SMSFs come in, because self-managed super funds work on a fixed cost structure. They're not a variable fee structure. where the more you have, the more you pay. So essentially, you move from a variable fee structure to a flat fee structure, and that creates immense opportunities. Because costs are down, your returns could be immense. Like people could do, as you said, you don't need to put everything in one sort of big ticket investment. You could do various strategies.
Yeah, I think you said right. Like SMSF, it's its own entity, yeah. So there's income and expenses. It's as simple as that. I feel like we tend to overcomplicate how SMSF is. Simply, it's a way where you have a property, it's income producing. You're putting your contributions to it as well. Yes, there are expenses like the loan and admin fees and whatever else comes with it. But usually if you're cash flow positive, you can potentially pay off a property in 10, 11 years if you set it up the correct way. But I've had client stories, Vikram, tell me why is this happening? Clients have purchased something in their super 10, 15 years ago and the property hasn't grown in value. They bought maybe stuff in regional apartments. Was there a stigma in the last 15 years that putting property in your super wasn't the way to go? Do you remember those times?
Yeah, I do remember those times. But essentially, see, at the end of the day, any investment, you got to invest in the right product. So just by simply saying you're going to put money into a property, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a return. In a property, there are two components of growth. One is capital and one is the rental. So the rental yield is something which you can visibly see, whether you're getting 3, 4, 5%. But essentially, if you want to talk about capital growth, you need to actually believe that the property is going to grow in the next 8 or 10 years. So you need to work with the right people. So overall, you could either get a return of 10 to 12%, that is the rental yield and the capital growth, or you could just get the rental yield and not make any growth on capital. Whereas if you borrow money at 6.5%, then you're sort of negatively geared.
I like that.
Yeah. So essentially, it's very important to ensure that the overall return on your investment is higher than the cost of money. And that can only be ensured if you get into the right product, whether it's property or funds or whatever. It has to be the right product. So people in the past have had bad experiences. They've actually been told to buy properties where technically they shouldn't have bought,
Correct.
in areas where there's been oversupply, or the fact that people just try to push properties. So you've got to work with the right people. You've got to work with the right team. But essentially, it's a great strategy as long as you can get the benefit of leverage where your returns are higher than your investment, which in normal course it should be. Because overall property returns are expected to be much higher than just 4 or 5%.
I think this is where our licenses and credentials come in handy. It's like, you've been doing this for 15 years, you built a great brand, your clients trust you. And from our end, like, we're QPIA, we're just a property advisor. So like you said, you need the right team, but we don't just make up these strategies on purpose. We don't just put in oversupply area or investment-minded area. Your super is for your retirement. This is the most important decision of your life, other than pretty much picking your trade of work at the end of the day. If you do it wrong, these side effects can kind of make you work forever. But if you do it right, you can retire 10, 15 years early and give yourself the opportunity to actually live in this great country. And we don't do more of it. 100% right team, right people, right branding behind you is what you need to get the right outcome. I want to ask you a question. Is there any particular dwelling type or property type you've seen from your experience that works better than the other for self-managed super funds?
So initially, I did see for some time where dual occupancy properties were pretty popular.
Dual rental.
Yeah,
so you pay off you quicker.
Yeah, much quicker. But now I've seen that you do get benefit in properties which are sort of single title properties as well, depending in areas where there is need for property or necessity housing, double income earners. So you've got to have the right areas. So I won't say any particular type of property will work. It's basically the strategy, and obviously you need to be in the right market at the right time.
Right.
So if you are there, then it doesn't really matter.
Do you have a good feel story of one of your clients who have done well in their super? Do you have a kind of a good story you can share?
Yeah, look, there was a client, I think around 6 years back, I got them into a property. I didn't get them, I don't do property myself, I'm an advisor, but they did a strategy through an SMSF and the LRB, which is called leverage recourse borrowing. So the biggest advantage in super is that you can use your super, borrow money against it, and then invest in a bigger investment product. So they had, I think, around 300 in their super. They put 200 from their super into the property, 100K I invested to manage funds for them. They probably bought a property for around 700 or so, somewhere I think in Central Coast. So essentially what happened is that property in the next 4 or 5 years almost doubled, and they were approaching their retirement. So the biggest advantage they gained was that, as you know, in SMSFs, if you buy a property in your super and you defer the sale till your retirement, the entire capital gain is exempted from tax.
That's beautiful.
So you will pay capital gain tax. So they save almost $350,000 in tax. And probably that means they would have funded their retirement for another 7 years. So that's the benefit. That's the benefit of doing the right. And believe me, it has happened. And I'm not saying it happens all the time. It happens if you work with the right people and with the right strategy. Don't over leverage. So say 50-60% sort of skin in the game as well. Put some money in super. Try to pay down your debt fast. And it's very easy because at the end of the day, when you make salary sacrificing your super, use that money to pay down your debt. So that's how you're saying, you can pay down a 25-year loan or in probably 10-15 years. And that's what people do. Put more money to super, get tax benefits on their personal incomes. They don't pay much tax because the salary have sacrificed other pre-tax dollars, and then they can pay down their debts faster. It's sort of a perfect strategy.
Would you rather, you all heard that, would you rather pay $350K in tax or get the right strategy people behind you to kind of benefit, leverage off that? That was actually a great story. I had similar stories as well, but I want to keep asking questions as I know the audience will enjoy this. Now, we've spoken about how SMSF, the trends, and how you can benefit from it. What are the disadvantages of SMSF? So let's talk about it seriously, because I know people out there, accountants and advisors, Vic, they told me I wouldn't advise anyone to get into SMSF. Like, there's a reason for that. They even had a stigma. While you answer that question, keep this in mind. Certain doctors and healthcare professionals are saying that they can't move their industry super into a self-managed super fund. Why is that? Is there something that restricts them from moving it over, Vic, from your experience, or is it just like the unions telling them they can't do it? What is it exactly?
So it depends. Essentially, if a super is in what's called a preservation mode, you can move the money. There are no restrictions. In my experience, I've seen that there have been some restrictions with government super funds, especially the PSS and these kind of funds. But I've never had a situation where a client has invested in a normal default or a corporate or any fund where they can't move the money. As long as the money is preserved, where you have met the requirements of your fund, you can roll over that money anytime. Anyone can roll over their money to a self-managed super fund. Probably if they're talking about transferring assets into a self-managed super fund, you can't do that. But unfortunately, you can't do in-species funds unless it's a commercial property. You can do that. So these are internal rules, but I don't see there's any restriction in moving money from your super into a self-managed super fund. At least I have not faced that restriction.
Some disadvantages of SMSF.
So look, primarily I would say 3. And they're not sort of disadvantages. I would say they're detriments. First off is the fact that look, SMSFs are regulated by the ATO, the Australian Tax Office. And ATO is very compliance here. What usually clients get sort of overwhelmed with is the fact that, they have to take over the responsibility as the trustee. So it's a fact. ATO says that once you become the trustee of your fund, then, the buck stops at you. So you may have the best advisor, the best accountant. But the fact is that once an ATO sort of says that you set up the fund, then you're responsible for the fund. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the fact that it is compliance driven, there are a lot of things which the ATO will expect you to do. Now, over the years, these have changed. It used to be worse 5 years back. Now things have improved because, as you know, SMSF is a well sort of oiled system now where you have accountants, you have advisors to work with you. So they take care of everything. But practically, whether some clients like to take on the role of the trustee or not, that is a question. According to me, it's something which initially could be a bit sort of overwhelming. You may feel there's something extra, but frankly, it's not. Because you now have systems in place where accountants, advisors, they look after everything and everything is taken care of. But that's one reason why they sort of shy away from doing SMSF, because the fact that, ATO does expect them to have some duties and responsibilities towards managing a fund. Second, probably could be the cost factor. Yeah, I did mention that, the recurring costs can come down because of the fact that you have a flat fee structure. But essentially, when you set up the SMSF, you have to spend some money, 8 to 10 grand to set up the thing. Or it's a one-off thing you pay, you have to get these set up, you guys set up the company, you guys set up the trust, and then you go to seek advice. The advisor has to be necessary. Other than these reasons, I don't see any sort of disadvantage of setting up an SMSF.
But that's the thing, it's the education and the way you've pre-framed this. A lot of the audience will understand that they're not disadvantages, it's what you know and how you know. I want to end on that because I know a lot of people, we have an event coming up, I believe next week, where me and Vic will answer your questions live. I think we answered it perfectly. We didn't give away too much, or we just spoke enough.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining, Vic. Okay. For those of you who may have questions around this kind of episode, let us know in the comments below. We'll answer all those questions individually in our next session and take it from there.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks.